just the possibility that during that, that drive from there to the strip, which is a pretty quick drive, maybe a minute or two, that they could have thrown something out of the car, but nothing was ever found. I would think if one of those guys, Tupac or Suge, was carrying a gun, you tend to carry a gun up front with you. I just can't see we're going to drive along and we're going to keep a gun in the back seat. It doesn't.
Yeah, right. Well, it just puzzles me why they weren't strapped up. That's Suge Knight and Tupac together. Where they were at. So that puzzles me.
Suge is the one. Suge,
you would think. I really
it's a puzzling. I know. Yeah.
Unless they tossed a gun, like I said, which you can't discount. I think it's unlikely, though. They're running from the police. It's heat of the moment. They've been shot, and it just doesn't seem like the type of situation where you're going to have the presence of mind and the ability to dump a weapon, especially when you're shot. Who's shot? So, you're not shooting somebody else.
What was Suge doing when you got to the car?
Well, when I got up to the car, and we're talking 5 or 6 cars pulling up, you got to understand, all I know is there's been a bunch of shots fired.
Yeah.
I don't know who fired at who. No one knows at this point. Who fired at who, which car's the shooter, what's going on. So when all those cars came to a stop, and, as far as the phrase that I arrived on the call, I didn't really arrive there. We literally ran into each other.
Yeah.
They're heading north and I'm heading south. And when they got to the intersection at Harmon, they tried to turn on Harmon and spun out because they're going too fast. And 2 of his tires are flat because he had smashed them against a curb. You've seen the rims, right?
Yes.
Right. That's from hauling ass out of there and hitting the curbs. So he's got 2 flat tires. He spins out in the intersection about the same time I literally come sliding in on a bike. So we run into each other, and so I pull out my gun and I'm yelling at everybody. The door's open. Everybody kind of pops out, and I'm yelling at everybody to get out, get down on the ground. I'm trying to control the situation as best I can, which is not a good situation. As soon as they pulled up, I'm like, I'm outnumbered. I have no idea who the shooter is. I don't.
Yeah, no idea where any of the shots are coming from or anything, right?
No idea. So it's the type of thing you just lay everybody out until you can get some help and start going from there. And some of those guys laid down and some of them didn't. It was kind of a tense situation, and they're kind of looking at each other, going, "Do we listen to this guy? Do we not listen to him? What's going on?" So. They kind of begrudgingly mostly get down on their knees. And then, Suge gets out and he starts, he's very mobile. He's running around. And he's been shot in the side of the head. Well, what had happened is he got hit and it penetrated his scalp, but not his skull. So he's literally, blood is flying from his head, but he's acting like there's nothing going on. He doesn't even acknowledge it. He doesn't touch it. He doesn't look at it. He doesn't care. And he's just running around, he's screaming at people and yelling, and the blood's flying out of the side of his head. And he eventually came around, where he got in back of me. So what I did is, I'm looking at the cars, and everybody had emptied all of the cars except one guy, which turns out to be Tupac. He's still sitting in the car, and I don't know, it's Tupac, and I'm looking at him going, okay, this must be the guy that's getting ready to shoot at me.
I want to interrupt you real quick. I'm sorry. You had no idea that this guy was Tupac?
Not yet, no idea at all. We don't know anybody. We just...
Right, it's just a chaos. It's chaos.
It's chaos. So I come up to the car and... I'm thinking, well, if somebody's going to shoot at me, it's going to be this dude in the car because he's got access to weapons. You can't see his hands. You don't know what he's doing. So I'm like, of everybody there, he's the threat. So I went up to the car and I'm yelling at him to open the door, show his hands out, and he's not doing that. So I grab the door handle I got my gun in my right, I grabbed the door handle with the left, and I'm trying to pull the door open. I had a hard time getting it open. Well, looking at the pictures later, there's bullet holes all around that door handle. And I think what happened, to this day, I'm pretty sure what happened, those bullets disabled the opening mechanism to some degree. So I'm pulling at it, I'm really having to yank it. And while I'm doing that, I got this guy who's a freaking mountain with legs coming to my backside, and so I turn around and I point the gun at him to get him away from me and tell him to get the hell away from me. And he'd kind of like, when I point the gun at him, he'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He'd kind of back up. He'd go back about 10 feet, but then he'd come right back at it. So this had happened a couple times. So the door popped open, and Tupac was leaning against the inside of the door. He's hurt bad, obviously. So when I opened the door, he kind of spilled out with the door. So I had him in my left hand and just kind of took him down to the pavement with my left hand.
Somewhat slumped.
Laid him down. Yeah, slumped. Okay. So he's slumped into the pavement, kind of kicks himself out of the car a little bit, like he wanted to lay down. And so I'm looking at him, and right about then, as Suge Knight was coming up, I look back, and there's another bike cop, and he's got his hand in Suge's chest, and he's pushing him back. And that was the first time I realized I'm not alone. I got some help. But you got to imagine this intersection is huge.
Yeah.
And people all over, cars all over. I mean, it's just a mess. And and there's still traffic that doesn't realize there's a whole situation. They're trying to drive through it, and it's just a mess. And that's when I ended up talking to Tupac and Suge. They finally kept him away, at least for the time being.
Yeah.
How big had the crowd gathered from the time you got there till up to this point?
Not as big as you might think. I would say there's tens of people, 40, 50 people, but two sides of the street. And, my attention's not really on them so much, but they're definitely there. But this all happened pretty quick, too. So The only people really there are the ones who already happen to be standing there, which is, a lot on the Strip on Saturday night. But I'd say tens of people.
Wow.
So, they're there. And you know what? Somebody did have, of course, there's no cell phone cams, as we mentioned, but somebody did have a camera and got some shots just with a regular camera. So there's some shots, there are some shots of that moment or slightly after that moment when there's pictures taken. Now I don't think there's any while Tupac was still there, but eventually people show up and start snapping photos
of the car and stuff like that.
Right, of the car, and I could see myself walking around and me talking to other cops and stuff like that. And a lot of those photos have been. Some people have taken this investigation to levels. It's just insane. But I get calls. They were like, "Oh, look at here, picture number 6. Why can't we see any blood in this picture? This proves he wasn't." And I'm like, "Look, these aren't crime scene photos. It's just some dude on the sidewalk, okay? Yeah. It's nighttime. It's dark out. People are moving. Most of the blood
with the Kodak throwaway camera, yeah."
I mean, there's just a million factors involved, and people, I think, try to look a little bit too deep sometimes.
Right. So I got to ask the question that everybody wants to hear and know.
Go for it, man.
Okay.
He's not still alive.
We'll get to that. Okay, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it wasn't. But so it was after you got some backup, right? And it was you and Tupac there, right? You were kind of just were you trying to apply any kind of medical help to him, or were you just trying to comfort him or keep him kind of calm, or anything you could do?
I was trying to talk to him. I knew he was clearly in bad shape. I couldn't tell exactly where he was shot, but it was multiple torso shots, and he's bleeding out of his mouth and his nose. So I know his situation is bad. Now he's still breathing. So some people have asked, well, why wasn't I giving him CPR? Well, the reason is he's still breathing. You don't give a breathing person, start breathing for him. He's not breathing well. He's I don't want to get too graphic, but he's got blood in the way and everything. He's not breathing well. But there wasn't a lot I could do. I later talked to some people at the hospital, and they said basically he could have been shot in the doorway of the hospital, and they probably couldn't have saved him. He was in pretty bad shape.
What kind of look did he have in his eyes? Was it? Do you think he knew he was leaving?
I don't think he did. And I'll tell you why. Because at first, when Suge's yelling at him, and Suge's yelling at him, pack. I guess apparently that was what he used to call them when they were just hanging out as buds.
Yeah.
And Tupac was looking back at him, and he was trying to yell back to him, and he couldn't. He was, he's trying to get his breath together, but you could tell he's looking at Suge, and he's just kind of ignoring me, even though I'm basically supporting him with my left arm. I'm trying to ask him who shot him. Most people who've been shot know who did it. Yeah. And I'm trying to get that information from him. I'm like, man, what happened?
That would be admissible in court, correct?
That is admissible. It's called a dying declaration. So, if you are able to say the person, you're able to tell the police what happened or tell them who shot him, it's not considered hearsay. Normally, that type of conversation, one person tells another, that's hearsay. But in a dying declaration, it's not it's an exception to the rule. So I was trying to get that information, and he's just ignoring me like I didn't even exist. And then I saw him just like in a moment, he crossed over from being like the squirming guy who's trying to yell, and he just went like, I can't do it anymore. He just like physically couldn't do it. And it just reminded me like you see a runner on a marathon, they're hurting, they're trying. And then all of a sudden, bam, they reach that point and they go, nope, I'm out. I can't go anymore. And that was kind of the way that went. And then once he quit trying to yell, he wasn't looking at Suge anymore. Then I looked at him, and now for the first time, he's looking at me, and I'm asking him who shot him. And, he gets his breath together, and I thought, oh man, I'm gonna get some info here. And then he looks at me and he says, "Fuck you," as we know.
Right.
And then right after he said that, I mean, that was kind of his last go around with breathing and stuff. And after he said that, his eyes kind of rolled back, and he goes into unconsciousness. The blood's taking over his mouth and nose at that point. So when the ambulance gets there, the first thing they do is they intubate him, establish an airway with the tube. So I grabbed a guy that worked for me, and he grabbed another cop, and I said, "Hey, ride in the ambulance with these guys." So Suge and Tupac rode in the ambulance together, because you got to remember, Suge's still flying blood out of the side of his head. I mean, he's not in a life or death situation, but he's clearly in a needs medical attention situation. As far as a lot of people ask about talking to the ambulance, I'm like, well, first of all, he was unconscious. Second of all, he's intubated. He can't speak. And I didn't expect that he would say anything in the ambulance to the hospital. I mean, his situation during that drive, which is, I don't know exactly how long, but you're talking like 10 minutes to get there, because you got traffic issues bad from the Strip to UMC. And
on fight night.
Yeah, especially on Mike Tyson.
Yeah. You can have lights and siren. You know what? Lights and siren don't work as well as people think that they do.
Yeah.
Once you're in that vehicle with lights and sirens, it doesn't help a lot, especially if you're in strict traffic, tight traffic. And I'm sure we've all been in this situation. You get the lights and sirens behind you, and you're like, I got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
I got a guardrail on my right, a car 2 inches in front of me.
Yeah.
All you can do is sit there. So it's pretty tough. So I think his ride to the hospital was probably at least 10 minutes, and he sure as hell isn't going to improve. His condition's not going to improve in that time. So I think when he got there, when they say they kept him alive, I think a more accurate description is they kept his heart beating. But he was machines and a skilled trauma unit, which we have, will do that. They can keep a heart beating, and that's what he did. It was eventually his mom that had the machine turned off a couple days later. And I've had people tell me, that's BS, because everyone knows he got up and left from the hospital, like against medical advice. And you know what they're doing? They're mixing up the New York shooting and the Vegas shooting.
Yeah,
and That's what that is. And I'm like, oh, I assure you, he did not get up and walk out of UMC.
Yeah.
That most definitely did not happen. And then I got with those guys and I said, I didn't think it was possible that anybody said anything, but they're like, nah. I mean, Suge Knight's running around well, not running around, but he's in the ambulance being a loud, obnoxious mess. And like I said, that dude's a handful, and he's a hard guy to control, and he's emotional, obviously. I think, when he was getting, he was clearly, and while we were on the street, clearly very concerned about Tupac. He was upset. He was so upset he wouldn't even acknowledge that he's shooting blood out of the side of his head. He didn't even care. He was looking at his dying friend,
And he kept walking up on you when you pointing the gun at him.
He wants to, and I know he just wants to check on him, but I can't have a dude in the middle of a situation like that coming up on my back. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, man, if this guy jumps on my back, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, I'm a big guy too, and I've had I'm almost 6'4", 394 right now, and every time I've gotten arrested or anything, they're always making sure I stay back. You know what I mean? And I'm the most harmless person in the world. You know what I mean? But
You're one of those guys that takes 3 sets of handcuffs because they can't put their arms.
And they can't even get any shackles around my ankles, you know what I mean? So that kind of puts, in my mind, to rest the conspiracy that Suge had something to do with his...
Nobody puts themselves in a car to be shot.
I never thought that was the deal.
No, but it is a huge conspiracy.
You don't hire somebody to shoot the guy while he's sitting next to you. And as we can see, you end up getting shot yourself. It's just by the grace of God that round didn't kill him. It's a miracle he survived.
Yeah, you're right. If it got him in the head anywhere, he's lucky he made it.
Oh, so lucky. I mean, I mean, it's funny because when I hear people say like he caught a little piece of shrapnel, and I'm like, it was more than that. I think he caught a round directly, and just because of the angle and because of his thick head, it didn't go through his skull, and he was I mean, it was a solid hit. It wasn't just a little piece of frag that cut his head.
So, tell us a little bit about, you're the first one. Obviously, this has made you famous, infamous, depends on who you ask about it.
Yeah.
How has this really affected you? Because, I mean, you have people coming from left field saying, oh, this guy, everything from conspiracy. You're the one who put Tupac in a trunk and drove him to Cuba. That
was one of my main questions, is how has this affected your life?
Yeah.
Well, and let me tell you, we could probably, if we had 3 beers, I could probably talk about that all night. But let me
Too bad we don't.
Let me start from the beginning in saying that I greatly underestimated the magnitude of this story. When it first came out, I thought it would be news for about a week, and I thought it would be pretty much restricted to the hip-hop community talking about it, and then that would be it. And man, was I wrong about that. But it kind of, at very first, it kind of freaked me out. It was unnerving. I'm not used to having, especially when the story was new. I'm not used to having, I mean, I've talked to a lot of reporters over my career, you talk to them now and then you're on the scene, but all of a sudden, I got 20 of them, blowing up my phone and blowing up my email, and the police departments was nice enough to take messages for people that called, and they're like, hey, we got like 100 messages for you. Here you go. Do with them what you want. It kind of freaked me out at first, and I went, I got a cabin. Maybe I'm a little bit hillbilly in myself too, so I got a cabin. I went up there, and my thought was, I give it 3 days, and it will blow over. Now, how naive was that? I'm like, I give it 3 days. No one really knows. I don't have a computer up there. I don't have internet. No one really knows how to get a hold of me up there. So I figured I'd just go 3 days, and I'd come back to Vegas, and all this would be done. And on the way home, on my cell, I called my buddy, and he's like, man, it's bad. He's like, don't look at the internet. And then somebody else called me, and they're like, hey man, you're on the cover of the New York Times. Rolling Stone is on this. All of the major networks are leaving me messages and everything. And I was really in a, oh my God, what have I done? Maybe I shouldn't have opened my mouth.
Yeah, that had to have been overwhelming.
It was strange to me. I think over time, as time went on, you start getting a little more and more used to it, and it starts becoming a little more and more regular. And I'll tell you something that helped is the overwhelming majority of the people in the press I talked to were very nice. No one was really out to burn me or, say bad things about, you can always make up stuff and twist things. And I'm like, everybody was being pretty fair to me. I got to be friends with, matter of fact, he's a British reporter, and I'll leave his name out of it, but he's a well-known reporter, and he kind of has become a friend of mine. I still socialize with him to this day, but he told me early on, he's like, you know what, you need a press person to handle all this. You're doing it all yourself. And my thought was, I was like, look, man, this is going away. It will go away soon enough. And that was like 7-8 years ago or something. Yeah. So like people, I had a lot of reporters asking me like, did you think you'd be talking about this 25 years later? And my response is, I didn't think I'd be talking about it 25 days later. But and I had underestimated Tupac's fame. I didn't realize I get calls from all over the world regularly, countries, and this is weird to me, places that don't speak English. Because if somebody, I can understand rap being a thing in other countries, but places that don't speak English, wouldn't it kind of lose something in translation? But I just did just like I'm doing with you guys, I did a show with a guy from Italy last month, good dude, and he came out to Vegas, we had dinner, and did another interview and everything, and that was good. So, and the door's open for you guys as well, should you pick it out.
Absolutely.
But, definitely.
I've kind of gotten used to it now. I learned, don't read the comments. You've always heard that, with I couldn't help it. I was that guy, especially when it was new. I was like, I gotta read the comments.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm also the guy where if, 99 people say, oh, good job, glad you were there, you did well. And one person says, you're a piece of shit, blah, 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 blah. Instead of looking at the 99, I look at the one, and I was like, well, why does this make me a piece of shit? I don't get it.
That's me. That's me. I'm like, I can't stand it.
With time, I've learned to move on from that. I don't care anymore. I don't read the comments. I quit reading the comments a few years ago. And, now and then somebody that's kind of a distant friend or something will be like, hey, man, did you hear what they said on this, that, the other? And I'm like, dude, I'm over it. I moved on from that long ago.
I was going to say there's a reason that some of this is there's a factor here that this is such a special case to me, right? For one, I was a huge Tupac fan at the time, right? Okay. Right. 2 days before Tupac got shot, my brother committed in front of me, and it's just attached. Because I remember riding down the road after my brother died, and I'm listening to Tupac. It was comforting to me at the time, right? And then I hear on the radio, 17.
Okay, because you know what? There seems to be, and I can understand why that would have a powerful connection for you. What I find with this case is it's all about the age gap. So the people now that are like, say, over 45 tend not to care about it. Of course, there's always exceptions. They tend not to care. And like people over 55, it means virtually nothing to them.
Yeah.
People that are like in their 30s now, maybe 40, those are the people that are like heavily into it. Yeah. And, I got a daughter who just graduated from high school, and I was surprised to learn, they're big into it. Which a lot of these kids weren't even born when this happened, and now it's just the hugest thing ever to them. And that's a little bit strange to me, but I guess his fame. I think we can safely say he's probably the most famous rapper ever.
I will definitely say he is. Yes, I would definitely say he's the most famous and probably the best rapper ever.
Okay. It's hard. It's hard. I know a lot of it depends on how do you define fame. I mean, obviously, guys like Snoop Dogg and stuff are as huge as it gets, and they've been that way for a long time. But I think he just falls into a different category somehow. And you guys know rap a lot more than I do for sure. I mean, does he? Is that it? I mean, is it because he's kind of in his own league by himself?
Look, Tupac was. I think Tupac was, like I said, I always seen him as an outlaw, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
He was about that life. You know what I mean? Apparently, that was the last words he spoke to. That's definitely a gangster thing to do if you think if you're about to cross over. He's not. He's famous for what happened to him, and he's famous for what he did. That's why he is so big. You know what I mean? Same thing as Biggie.
I saw where that there were literally like hundreds of songs that had never been released.
Yeah.
And so clearly the guy was just putting out songs on a daily basis. He had to be to have so many.
I think he had a lot wrote from while he was in prison too.
Okay.
A lot of time.
Obviously time on your hands, but I don't know. I mean, he just seems to be as big as it gets, and I certainly didn't realize it at the time, because a lot of people asked me, were you just going, oh my God, it's Tupac? And I really wasn't. I knew that there was at the time there was a rapper named Tupac, and during the course of this thing, I figured out that was him. Suge's yelling at him, pack, pack, pack.
Yeah.
And you could see the guy was wearing a ton of high-end jewelry. He was driving a top-end BMW, all tricked out and everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can see that he was somebody right away.
Exactly.
But some people that know a lot about this more than I do about, and I don't claim to really know anything about the rap industry, but I'm told he's the man. It's as big as it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just all added to him putting more songs out means
and another thing with
still alive, and
right, that helped add that he's still alive, and the fact that there were still songs coming out after he died.
Well, that musicians are worth more dead than they are alive.
Absolutely, and I think it made him more famous. I always
absolutely
nothing against Elvis, but I think if he'd lived till he was 80, he'd have probably been playing State Line on Tuesday night. Don't mean to get the Elvis fans hot.
I don't know if we got too many of them in here now.
That's the next guy, but then an early death brings about a certain notoriety for sure.
Yeah.
So tell us, if you work down on the strip, no matter if you're a police officer, a busser in a nightclub, any of that, you kind of get used to famous people are going to be around during big events.
Sure.
So you kind of lose that starstruck, even if you're just like, oh man, that Tupac, that sucks. But it's just another famous
we meet a lot
of
in the capacity working as a cop, you meet a lot of famous people, and I've worked like a lot of us on a lot of movie sets and stuff like that, and there's only a couple people for me on this planet that would get me starstruck. I'm generally not a starstruck kind of guy. I'll throw one out there, Paul McCartney. For me, if I met Paul McCartney, I'd probably be like a 14-year-old girl, and I don't know what I'd say, but we all have those people that we think that of, but the list is pretty short for me. I don't know. I think you just get used to hanging around them a little bit, and some people care about it more than others. And I was just not one who was, the kind of guy who was into that.
What about, I mean, after, now you have to go back to work, you got to act normal, your life, at home, your job, all this has happened. People are wanting to talk to you, people like us that are like, hey, how do you cope?
You got to remember this story. I couldn't let this story out until I retired. So there had been a lot of years that had passed while I was still working when this story, I mean, obviously everybody knew who was shot, he had been killed, but they didn't know all of these details.
Right.
Now, one thing you can't do in police work is comment on somebody else's case, especially another section's case. Like when I left, I was a sexual assault lieutenant. It would be completely inappropriate, more than inappropriate, for me to comment on a homicide case. It's not my place to do so.
Right.
You can't do it, and you shouldn't be able to do it. And I had to wait till I was retired till I said anything. Another thing I had to wait for was I have to think, is this thing ever going to court? I'm going to mess up. I'm going to tread upon that court case, and that's certainly not good. So by the time, I spoke about it, which I want to say is, I don't even remember the year exactly, but I'd say 2014. I mean, it had been a long time since the shooting before I came out with it, which is another reason I kind of got blindsided by the popularity of the story. I'm like, well, I'm coming out with it, but it's like 16, 18 years old. No one's going to care. Well, I was wrong.
Yeah, but people do care.
So there is that time gap there. So how it affected me at work the next day was very little. I mean, the other guys that were on the scene too, of course, there's eventually several people that show up. They're talking about it a little more, but I think people need to remember too that story is bigger now than it was then. Being all, Vegas cops, we see homicides and shootings and things like that pretty regular.
Yeah.
So this wasn't something that really stood out that much at the time.
Okay. So for high profile, in the other, 22 plus years and 364 days, that was not this day.
Right.
Are there any cases that just stick with you? Any, like, big fish basically from Vegas, or just something that
you know
is
what?
hard to shake?
There's so much stuff that I almost and this is for anybody who's been a cop here for that long. There's so much stuff you just have to kind of put it in categories. Like what what was this? What was that? What was the other? Because there's so many things. But I think and a lot of people have said, other cops and stuff, they're like, man, you're a cop for 25 years and you're remembered for one call that ended badly. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of sucks. Yeah. I was like, I could tell a lot of
right.
things that ended successfully, and no one knows or cares about those.
That kind of overshadows it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you.
It happens, but you know what? I'll tell you what though, because we've been going for over an hour. If it's cool with you guys, we'll do. You want to do another show? And
yes,
absolutely. If you don't mind.
Direction.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there's so much stuff there, and I don't want to burn anybody out. Everybody's, God bless them if they could listen to me for an hour. I'd hate to.
Look, I could listen to you all night long, buddy.
Listen, this is so awesome.
But there's a lot of stuff, and I think it went well, and I think we could do some. Let's do some more. We'll give everybody a little bit of a break, and I'll take care of my dog who's biting my feet, and you guys can take a break. But so we can agree on that. We'll all three. We'll go again.
Oh yeah.
We'll talk and figure out what we want to do. But I appreciate that you want to look past the Tupac thing again. And,
that's there's a lot more interesting things that we can get out of this than just that. You know what I mean? Everybody wants to hear that. So that's the.
It's funny because I'll meet people somewhere. They'll come up to me and they're like, they want me to tell them. It's just like in a bar or something. They want me to tell them the whole story, and I'm like, look. It's on YouTube in 40 different places.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, not to be an ass or anything, but I don't really feel like doing it right now while I'm trying to drink my beer. You know,
Right.
that type of thing. So,
Yeah.
So I get asked. I get asked a lot. You know what the thing is too? I meet a lot of Tupac fans, and I tell you, they treat me very, very well. I've been treated nice. I mean, for anybody who had a problem with me, there's 100 of them that were just great people. And I've made, as far as do I regret telling this story originally? I don't. And the reason is because I've met so many good people, and I have so many friends now that I otherwise wouldn't have met if it hadn't been for this. So it's gone well, and I get along great with the fans and everybody. I know Tupac is, and I understand this more now, but that it's very important to them.
Oh yeah.
So I try to.
This is history, man.
I'm never rude about it or anything.
Yeah.
So I try to, and people get a hold of me, and I'm pretty good about getting back to them, I think. And, as long as I don't see, every now and then somebody get a hold of me, and I'll look them up, and they're, real bad with conspiracies. And I'm like, I just really don't need to go there. But,
my goal really here, I was wanting to learn more about you. So what next time, it's not, because I did want to hear the Tupac stuff, right? Directly from you. The same stuff everybody else has heard. But I want, like I said, we're kind of interested in your life and how it's been affected. And we'll get to that next time and all that.
If you look at it, you can say, okay, if you take Tupac and his fame out of that story, it's just another day on the strip.
And
I want to hear about the crazy,
Right. And, that's the thing. Like I said, this has happened to 100 other guys that no one knows or cares about. Now, I don't get a dying declaration very often. That's pretty darn rare. But, it does happen every 10 years or so.
This is awesome.
We'll stay in touch with you. Yeah, you have all my blessings. I do appreciate you getting back to me after your partners was laid to rest. All that. It's just been amazing to speak to you, really. You're a legend.
All right, guys. Thanks. It's been great talking to you, and I look forward to the next one.
All right.
Okay, I'll stay in touch, okay?
All right.
Yeah, buddy. All right. What do you think?
I like him. He is super cool, bro.
Is he not a nice guy, man?
Super nice guy. I like every bit of talking to him. And, it sucks. I'm sure this guy, that's all he hears. Is,
Yeah.
Tell me about Tupac. Tell me about Tupac. Tell me about Tupac.
Yeah.
And I know, there's got to be so many things in 20 some odd years that he has seen.
Yeah.
And he's a good dude because he made it sergeant. He made it to lieutenant. You know what I'm saying? You don't, Rudy Poos don't go up the ladder like that.
No, man.